Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Commanding Officer of the School of Infantry East, Colonel Barry J. Fitzpatrick, Jr., welcome and thank you for joining us as we celebrate 69 years of continuous service of women in our Corps and observation of Women's History Month, which is in March. This year's theme is Women's Education and Empowerment.
Let us pray. Gracious God, you have pieced a quilt of scarlet and gold and marpat, and spread it before us stitched with stories of ancestors as distant as Opha May Johnson and as near as Brigadier General Lori Reynolds. Today we tie the threads of ourselves to this work and honor the journeys of those who came before us, leaving Parris Island for places like Camp Pendleton, Camp Lejeune, and Okinawa. As we take our place as quilters in battalions, squadrons, training commands, or on staff, let us give thanks, holding in our hearts those who stitched us to our past, those who seam us to our present, and those who needle us toward the future. Grant us the courage to be proficient at our performance, loyal to the Corps, and Semper Fidelis. And may your presence be with all of our Marines, O God, whether here at home or forward deployed. Forever grant us wisdom, guidance, and grace. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for honors to Brigadier General Reynolds and remain standing for the entrance of the cake. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now cut a cake in celebration of 69 years of proud service of women in our Corps. The first piece is given to the guest of honor, Brigadier General Lori Reynolds. She was commissioned in the Marine Corps in 1986 after graduating from the United States Naval Academy. She is currently the Commanding General of the Eastern Recruiting Region, Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Parris Island, South Carolina. The next piece is given to the oldest and youngest Marines present, symbolizing the experience and the youthful spirit that are hallmarks of our Corps. The oldest Marine present is Mrs. Jean Blick. She served in the Marine Corps from 1951 to 1953 and is 86 years young. The passing of the cake from the oldest to the youngest Marine symbolizes the passing of history and traditions to the next generation. The youngest Marine present is Private First Class Jewel Magnathil. She was born on 17 September 1993 in Napa, California, and is 18 years old. She enlisted in the Marine Corps on 7 August 2011 and is currently assigned to Student Administration Company, Headquarters and Support Battalion, School of Infantry East.
Welcome to SOI East, everyone. Women Marines Association, Tar Heel Chapter, General Reynolds, commanders, staff, students of SOI. It's great to have you here today to celebrate this event. The Sergeant Major and I were talking about having this event about 2 months ago, and he was updating me on why we do it and how long SOI has been involved. And I said, do you have a guest speaker? And he said no, because as he was talking, the first thing that came to my mind was the fact that we should try to get Brigadier General Reynolds to come here. There's a reason for that. We are fellow classmates from the Naval Academy from 1986, although we didn't know each other very well back then, because she was doing well and getting good grades and having good positions, and I was on restriction and things like that. So we got reacquainted in 2009 as we were preparing to go to Afghanistan. She was the MEF Headquarters Group Commander, and I served with her for a year. And it was a great year. She had a tough job. She was a city planner, a battle space owner, a sheep herder, a DEA agent. She had it all out there. And she was also someone who I could call at 1 o'clock in the morning and say, I'm going crazy. And she would talk me off the ledge. So it is an opportunity to have someone that I truly respect. We were in Afghanistan when we found out that she was selected for Brigadier General. And amongst her colonel peers, you have never seen a group of people who were more genuinely happy to see a good one get selected. So without further ado, General Reynolds.
Good afternoon, everybody. Marines, Commanders, Sergeants Major. Thank you, Colonel Fitzpatrick, and good afternoon. You know, it's a great honor for me to be here to spend some time with you this afternoon to reflect on the history of women in our Corps. This has been a great week for us, in that just this past Monday, and Colonel Ordeg was there, I was very pleased to be a part of our 69th anniversary there at Parris Island on the formation of the Marine Corps Women's Reserve. So as you've heard, on 13 February 1943, then Commandant General Holcomb established the Marine Corps Women's Reserve, and that decision paved the way for continuous service of women in the Corps. So this week, the 4th Battalion Command Team down there organized and hosted a tremendous celebration that was attended by more than 200 women Marines from all up the East Coast. The day was concluded by a celebration dinner with a cake cutting where we were absolutely honored to have a Marine by the name of Staff Sergeant Barbara Blunt. She was celebrating her 62nd anniversary of her graduation from boot camp on that day. She may have been classmates with you. So, unbelievable service. There were more than a dozen female sergeants major and master gunnery sergeants there, 4 commanders of 4th Battalion, including Lieutenant General Fran Wilson, retired, Major General Garrett, and a whole lot of former and current drill instructors. And I'm going to tell you something. When you want to stand up in front of talk to 12 or 13 female sergeants major, master, I know my uniform was inspected 20 times that night. It's pretty intimidating women. But today, ladies and gentlemen, you have your own opportunity to reflect on our history as women Marines, and I'm honored to be a part of it, so thank you. Let me very quickly take you through our history before I get into the meat of my message to you, and this is a similar message that I gave on Monday night. As I mentioned, this week marks the 69th anniversary of the Marine Corps Women's Reserve, which paved the way for the continuous service of women in the Corps. But women served in the Marine Corps prior to 1943. In fact, there's even a legend about Lucy Brewer, who disguised herself as a man, the name of George Baker, and served as a Marine aboard the USS Constitution in the War of 1812. During World War I and during World War II, when women answered the call to serve, and again, General Holcomb announced the formation of the Marine Corps Women's Reserve in 1943. And over 23,000 women served during World War II. As the Korean War heated up, women again were called to fill additional billets other than clerks and supply, such as air traffic control, drafting, and motor transport. And in August of 1965, as the Vietnam War began to heat up, the authorized end strength for women Marines was increased by opening new occupational fields with availability to attend formal schools and being assigned overseas. I remember being a platoon commander in 1st Marine Division Communication Company in 1990. I had served there with that company for 3 years, and I detached at the end of July in 1990, and on the 1st of August, Saddam Hussein crossed the border into Kuwait, and the deployment into the Gulf region began. And I was at home on leave waiting to go to Okinawa when all of my female radio operators, I had radio platoon, all of my best radio operators were my females because they stayed in the company while the men came through the company on their way to infantry battalions. So I had some of the most gifted radio operators, and the decision was made that we're not taking the women. This was in 1990. And they called me and they said, "Man, what do we do? We need to go." And I said, "Wait it out. They can't go without you." And sure enough, a week later, they packed their bags and the women went. Today, we're nearing the end of a decade of wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, where women have gone where none would have thought possible 10, 15, 20 years ago. Those of some of you ladies in the front row, you probably would never have thought that we would be where we are today. I know you would. On Parris Island, where we make Marines, it wasn't until 1976 when women were allowed to attend drill instructor school. Upon graduation, they received a scarlet epaulet in lieu of the traditional DI campaign cover, even though they completed the same training. During the same time in 1976 at the Basic School for Officers, all male officers with non-infantry MOSs conducted the 26-week training to include the basic infantry training. However, the women officers only did 12 weeks, which didn't include the basic infantry portion. This concerned their commandant at the time, who was General Wilson, and he said, "No, we're going to train all the women the same as we train the men, ensuring that the training offered at all the schools prepared Marines to lead, irrespective of their sex." It took another 10 years to require women to qualify with the M16. In 1986, women were finally allowed to carry a sword in formation. And eventually in 1988, General Gray announced that basic warrior training would be extended to all recruits. In 1996, female drill instructors were finally authorized to wear that campaign cover. And then, of course, you all know in 1997, females began to attend Marine combat training here. So with that as the background, let me talk to you about what I think has been the bedrock of women Marines since the days of Lucy Brewer. And as I thought about the message I wanted to give you today, all that I continued to think through was this message of persistent professionalism. And I know we have some members of the Women Marines Association today, and you younger Marines, you need to listen to their stories. Because it occurs to me each time I hear some of these stories that the only reason I get to stand here today is because so many of you stood in formation in the past. They fought for the opportunities that my peers took advantage of. And those of you who are coming behind us, you continue to encourage and inspire us, older Marines. See, we all have a role to play, and it's a very small Marine Corps. So as I was doing my research to begin to write this, I came upon a couple quotes that guided my thinking. And the first one is going to take us back to October 1945, when then Brigadier General Gerald Thomas said the following: "The opinion generally held by the Marine Corps is that women have no proper place or function in the regular service in peacetime." General Thomas was the Director of Plans and Policy, and he elaborated by saying, "The American tradition is that a woman's place is in the home." And I like this part. "Women do not take kindly to military regimentation. During the war, they have accepted the regulations imposed upon them, but hereafter the problem of enforcing discipline alone would just be a headache." So back then, the decision was whether to keep women on active duty in the Corps once the war ended. How far we've come from those days. Today, the decision that our leaders face is whether we could or should open closed units to women Marines, or whether to open closed MOSs to women Marines. And I'm not going to ask you to enter that debate today. I will only say that if history is our guide, the decision will be more emotional than its execution. Our women Marines have proven time and again over the decades that they are up to any task, any mission, any challenge, and that they can take kindly to military regimentation when properly motivated, trained, and inspired. So today, as we contemplate 69 years of dedicated service to our Corps, and as we continue to embrace change that our society demands and that our youngest Marines thirst for, I am hopeful for the future, because I have been informed by the great tradition and example of the great Marines who have paved our way. At each graduation on Parris Island and reinforced here at the School of Infantry, new Marines are handed down the legacy and proud traditions of those who have established our great reputation. Instructors speak daily throughout training of Marines who have borne the title with distinction and selfless service. We women Marines are no different than the larger organization we serve. We own the legacy, the pride, the tradition, and the responsibility to take care of the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor, and all that it stands for. But there is something more here. In us, there is the responsibility and the additional pride that comes with being part of the fewer and the prouder, the women Marines. And I know that there is history to the term women Marines. In 1943, when General Holcomb established the Women's Reserve, he said, they don't need a nickname, they don't have one. They get their basic training in a Marine atmosphere at a Marine post. They inherit the traditions of the Marines, they are Marines. But ladies, because of the proud tradition I inherited as a female Marine, I have always been proud to be a woman Marine. Rather than it representing a title of disrespect within our Corps, for me it has signified a silent elitism within our Corps. As females in the Corps, we don't choose to set ourselves apart, but we are responsible for our history. As today demonstrates, we take pride in each other's accomplishments. We continue to embrace progress and change in how women are used in service to our nation. And we must always remember the lessons of the Marines who have so well worn the colors of our Corps. Their service has been marked by persistent professionalism. I see it so well on Parris Island. Just you take simple things like the perfection of the uniform, the military carriage of our NCOs and our staff NCOs, the teamwork, the unit pride that I see of the women that graduate from 4th Battalion, even the tightness of the hair button. There's no other military service that can make those hair buttons that tight. Nobody else can do that. I'm proud to represent women Marines. I'm humbled to still be serving with so many of them. I'm grateful for the women who paved the way for me and others like me. But today I'd like to share with you a couple observations of the greatest women with whom I have served. And this is not going to be the exhaustive list of what makes a good female Marine. Many of you could contribute to this list with your own observations, and they'll all be informed by your experience, the times in which you served, and the people with whom you served. But I think I can offer some here that will stand the test of time. The first observation was that they always carried their own pack. This seems like an easy one because you can only help the Corps if you first take care of yourself. This implies the importance of our own physical fitness as well as our emotional and mental willingness to contribute to the mission and to not be a bystander to the Corps' most important tasks. We must contribute where the Corps needs us. If that's in combat, then we're going to combat. If that's on a female engagement team, then sign me up. And I think it was just this kind of willingness of female Marines throughout our history that has paved the way for decision makers to actually consider the merits of women in combat units and in combat MOSs. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no dispute that women Marines have distinguished themselves in the past 10 years of war. They've gone when called and served in places not thought possible 69 years ago. I watched last year when I was deployed with Colonel Fitzpatrick as the women in the female engagement teams, tasked out in 4-man teams led by an NCO, absolutely distinguished themselves in Afghanistan. They trained hard, they studied hard, they worked hard, and they were absolute strategic enablers for our Corps in Helmand Province. They lived alongside the infantry company they supported, and the only time I heard them complain was when they were recalled to a FOB to refit and rest. They carried their own pack, and you would have been enormously proud of them. As a young captain serving as a platoon commander at OCS, one of my drill instructors was now Sergeant Major Angela Manis. She was a physical machine. She taught me how to climb 2 ropes at a time. And when my platoon graduated, she was selected as the first female physical training instructor at OCS. And she trained male candidates after that. She carried her own pack, and she taught my candidates to do the same, and they're lieutenant colonels now. Second observation I have is that a thick skin and a sense of humor are absolute requirements. I remember one of my first months on recruiting duty. Back in 1997, thanks to Lieutenant General Mutter, who was then at Manpower, the Corps had decided to continue to select women as recruiting station commanders. And my friend and I, then Major Laura Little, we'd been pulled out of our places as company commanders at the Com Battalion, and we were told to assume our command of recruiting stations. And I was apprehensive as I took command in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that I'd been told that leadership on recruiting duty is different. It's like combat, I was told. Recruiting is the only peacetime combat we have where you are on a daily basis in direct combat with the enemy, which is the other services. Okay then, so I reported for duty not knowing anything about recruiting duty, and it was an interesting environment. I worked for a colonel whose background was infantry. It was my first time working for an infantryman, and it was this grunt's first time having a woman on his team. And as it happened, my headquarters was just down the passageway from the colonel's headquarters, so on a particularly difficult month when my RS came in a couple contracts short, I decided to take it like a man and go face him, tell him that I was done and that we were 2 contracts short. So when I got there, he was just getting off of the phone with one of my peers in one of the other recruiting stations, and he was patting him on the back and petting him and saying, my man in Ohio, my man this, my man, and I got to go in and tell him that his woman missed mission. And so I reported in and I told him that my station had missed. And he looked at me and he pointed very hard in my direction and he said, Major Reynolds, there's only 2 WMs I've ever known that was worth a shit. Angie Salinas and Lori Reynolds. Don't make me take your name off my list. So I'm trying hard to keep my bearing because I thought it was very funny. But I'm thinking at the same time, well, for goodness sake, he only knows 2 of us. And so he thinks we're both pretty good, so wait till he meets the rest of us. This is going to be great. It was funny. You had to make funny situations funny. I have a friend who, when we were young, was an incredible runner. She could run circles around any Marine, man or woman. Kyle was an executive officer of a company and landing support battalion back in the late 80s in Camp Pendleton when she was picking up stragglers on a company run. She's running with this big, tall Marine who should have been able to hang, but he wasn't. And so there's my friend, little Lieutenant Kyle Walton, 5'3", blonde ponytail bouncing in her wake, red silky PT shorts. Some of you remember the red silky PT shorts. Running up the hill with her run drops at Camp Delmar, and she's trying hard to encourage them to catch up. And as they pass this formation of male Marines from the 15th MEU who are watching very intently, her 6'2" run drop says in a very loud voice, "Come on, Lieutenant, you can make it. Keep working hard. Give him everything you got." It was pretty smart. I don't recommend you try that if you're ever running. So Kyle's natural reaction was laughter. And then she kicked it into high gear and she made it very clear who the run drop was. And we could be here all day if I asked you all to recall funny stories like this, but the bottom line is that a sense of humor and a thick skin, followed by persistent professionalism and performance, are a very good combination to have. My third observation is that the best women Marines never let them see you sweat. My drill instructors are absolute masters of this on Parris Island. There are so many tricks and tactics used. Some of you are drill instructors, I know. So many tricks that you use to make sure that the recruits never see you in a vulnerable, tired, weakened state. DIs become godlike creatures, all-knowing, all-seeing, omnipresent, and recruits wonder if they're ever going to be as smart or as fit or professional or as deserving to wear the Eagle Globe and Anchor as their drill instructor is. But behind the scenes, the drill instructors are sacrificing time with their families, wondering how they're going to get their kids picked up for the doctor's appointment or school. Their personal time consists of a half day on a weekend if they're lucky. There's intense teamwork to make sure that each DI puts her best foot forward, and there's preparation, planning, and then more preparation for the day's events. And oh yes, there's the absolute commitment to make sure that the sacrifice is worth it in the end, and that only the most qualified and deserving recruits are handing the legacy of our Corps. The end result is that our DIs teach that the outward composure of professionals matters. You never know the impact that you may have on someone you will never meet. Composure, bearing, professionalism, job proficiency, fitness, what drill instructors and your instructors here at SOI demonstrate every day in this environment is what our history as women Marines has also demonstrated. Personally, early on in my days at the Academy, I learned that never letting them see me sweat had its own meaning. I learned that composure on the inside was equally important to composure on the outside. In 1982, when BJ and I were plebes, making women cry was a bit of a varsity sport for upperclassmen at the Academy. And fortunately for me, I'd been forewarned, so I agreed to the game, but I absolutely refused to allow any of them to affect me personally on the inside. Now, I'm not much of a crier anyway, but I told myself going in that they weren't going to get to me, and they didn't. But the funny thing is that when they failed to break me, my upperclassmen would say, "Oh, okay, Reynolds, so you think you're going to be a Marine?" And before I entered the Academy, I didn't know what I wanted to do. They basically, because they taught me that women Marines don't cry. And so you see some men in colleges that you've never met know the reputation of women Marines. And that reputation has stood the test of time. Counseling is meant to make you better, and it certainly did for me. Because of my limited experience with upperclassmen in school, when I entered the Corps, I was ready for men who wanted to counsel me. I took what worked and I discarded what didn't. Time and again, I learned that I had to develop my own leadership style that reflected my own personality. Inner calm comes with knowing what you stand for and being comfortable in your own skin. It's in knowing where your red lines are and what your standards are. I learned that never letting them see me sweat was a direct reflection of my own comfort with my leadership style. In combat, it was that plus faith in things much larger than the Marine Corps, and in understanding my Marines, their families, and our mission. So what is the personal example that you set? How do you set it? The burden and responsibility of leadership is not light. Those who think it aren't doing it right. Sometimes leadership is assumed, and other times it is assigned. No matter how we may find ourselves in leadership positions, how we lead matters. And that may seem like a no-brainer, but I've learned by watching that leadership that prepares, that works hard, and that believes in the mission is most effective. I've learned that the steady and consistent example of serious-minded, hard-working leaders who are accountable to their Marines works far more effectively than those who merely talk about leadership or go through the motions of the daily schedule. And I've watched so many female Marine leaders lead more strongly every day through example, character, and daily bearing than any leadership lesson taught from a book. Some years ago, I read this passage from the Bible. It's Titus 2:7 and 8, and it has encouraged me time and again. And it says, "In everything, set them an example by doing what is good. In your teaching, show integrity, seriousness, and soundness of speech that cannot be condemned, so that those who oppose you may be ashamed because they have nothing bad to say about you." Inside and out, I've watched phenomenal women Marines strive to never let them see you sweat. Ladies and gentlemen, what I have seen and learned from the women with whom I have served is that more often than not, their leadership is assumed. They lead through personal example, persistent professionalism, wanting the job done correctly and well the first time, They break down barriers through integrity, seriousness, and soundness of speech, and I'm standing on their shoulders today. My final observation that I'll share with you is that we are accountable for each other. Over the years, women Marines have done a commendable job of pressing the highest standards of professionalism, of holding each other accountable, of encouraging and mentoring, and sometimes disciplining each other. During entry-level training, we apply service standards in a way that remains unemotional and fair, but very firm. We do this because there is an unspoken recognition that we are the keepers of our own standards. If you ask most observers of recruit training on Parris Island, they will tell you that the drill instructors of 4th Battalion are harder than most. Their standards are rigidly enforced. Their presence is persistent. Their observation is relentless. Their drill exact. Our drill instructors emphasize a lot of things on that island, not the least of which is the emotional maturity to represent the Corps as it should be represented, because we are accountable to each other. It is my accountability to many of the Marines with whom I have met or heard about or served with that keeps me honest every day and whose daily personal example I still follow. So that's it. It's that simple. We're Marines. So while I've never been one who has sought to single out the service of women Marines, every once in a while it is appropriate to take the time to honor women Marines. I started this with a quote about the future of women in 1945. I'll finish it with a quote written 65 years later about all of our young Marines, and it says, "Our ranks are few because of the difficulty of our training and the commitment needed to face the difficulties of our missions. Our nation places its trust and confidence in those who earn our title, as every decision a Marine makes has the potential to prevent a conflict or to escalate it. At all times focused, alert, and in control, Marines are strategic warriors with training, judgment, and character our entire nation can depend upon. Ladies and gentlemen, through their persistent professionalism that I've witnessed in my own career, and that is represented here in this room, women Marines have established a reputation for greatness among military women and elitism within our Corps. We carry our own pack, we never let them see us sweat, we have a sense of humor, and we are accountable for each other. But more than any of this, we are simply Marines. That has been and always will be enough. Thank you, and happy anniversary.